Hello and welcome to the analysis of iCAT01, the final mock in our All India National Level CAT test series for CAT18. By now, you would have attempted definitely 20 mocks at a bare minimum and would have had a fair idea of what your best strategy is, how many questions you are able to attempt in each section, how you want to go about attempting each section, and so on. Based on this strategy, you should attempt the last 4-5 mocks and try and maximize your scores. In this particular mock, we will analyze it in 3 parts, one for each section. We'll have a look at each section and see how tough or easy it was and which were the questions that should have been attempted. So before we go into the very first section, that is verbal ability, we first try and classify the entire mock. So our faculty have classified this as a moderate to tough mock, which is typically what we also see in CAT, with an average difficulty level somewhere around 1.98, which is just below 2. Now what exactly does this mean? As we've said all along over the first 24 mocks, if I assign a difficulty level of 1 to the easy questions and 3 to the tough questions, then this indicates the mathematical average of the difficulty of each question in the mock. So in that sense, every question on an average can be called just around moderate. But why do I then classify it as a moderate to tough mock? Because the average difficulty as per our faculty for the actual CAT exam over the last 3 years has been rated somewhere between 1.9 to 1.95. So in that sense, it was marginally tougher compared to the actual CAT, which is absolutely understandable considering it's a mock. Let's have a look firstly at the verbal ability section. So like always, it had 24 RC questions spread over 5 passages, and it had 10 non-RC questions which also comprise numerical entry plus para summaries. So this particular section was classified as a moderate section with an average LOD close to 1.8. Again, just to give you a perspective here, the average LOD in CAT is 1.8 to 1.85. So in that sense, it was a perfectly representative section of the actual CAT verbal ability. The analysis for VA will have to be done in 2 parts. One dedicated to the RCs, which is 24 questions, and the second smaller part for the 10 non-RC questions. Now the most standard breakup of the RCs is where we have 3 passages with 6 questions each and 2 passages with 3 questions each. As we've said all along, we can always have different combinations such as 2 6-question passages and 4 3-question passages and so on. But this is the most frequently used combination and hence we've used it in most of our mocks. So here we first need to try and identify the 3 to 4 RCs that we would try to attempt out of 5 and then maximize our attempts there. Now, how do we decide which RCs to attempt? So generally, as we say, we look at the subject matter of the RCs, and then along with that, we recommend that you should look at not only the number of questions, which could be 3 or 6, but also at the word length, which is given here, because that indicates the amount of effort that you need to put. Along with that, you also need to look at the difficulty level of the questions in the passage. Now, it is very clear that this difficulty level can generally be identified only after the mock has been attempted. But once you start taking a number of mocks, this starts coming more naturally to you, and when you look at a question, you are in a much better position to try and identify the right questions to attempt, or try and identify the easy questions from the tough questions. So here let's have a look at these parameters. Firstly, as we said, the average difficulty of the section was 1.8. So I can observe that there are 2 passages, one on regulations on Pakistani TVs. This was slightly tougher, or I can say more or less at par with the section average. And then there was one on housewives, which was slightly simpler. So these 2 more or less balanced out each other and were at par with the section average. On the other hand, there was this one passage which was significantly tougher than the other passages also and the section also, whereas there were two other passages which were definitely on the easier side. So here we had two easy passages, one easy to moderate passage, one moderate passage, and one moderate to tough passage. Let's start with the toughest passage first. As you can see, just compare the subject matter of these 5 passages. Just by this heading, it is evident that one on housewives, flight woes or flight troubles, and Pakistani TV regulations are definitely more readable topics compared to something like gender selection. There was also one on power of rejection, which was average, but its questions were on the easier side. However, when I look at this passage on gender selection, I observe that there are a number of parameters going against it. One, it was the longest passage of the entire section. Now, just to give you an idea, the standard word length nowadays is somewhere between 400 to 600 words. So, in this sense, it was definitely much longer than expected. Two, for such a long passage, there were only 3 questions. So, the amount of time and effort invested would potentially have gone to waste. 3, so this is a negative, this is a second negative, and then the topic is on the tougher side. Finally, as I can see, in a tough topic, the questions are also on the tougher side, so that's a 4th negative. So there is nothing in this passage which really attracts me towards attempting in the exam, and that is why I would have definitely skipped it. On the other hand, if I look at the passage right before it, it was a very readable passage which was more like an excerpt from somebody's diary. Secondly, I can see that it was a very short passage with hardly 400 words, right in my range here. Thirdly, it had 6 questions. So now this is the exact contrast of the previous case where I have a short passage with 6 questions on a very readable topic, and then I realize that the questions are all very simple. So there's hardly any moderate question. So the first one, as we said, missed all the criteria. Here this ticks all the boxes, and definitely this is something that I would try in the exam, and I would try and maximize my attempts. Similarly, when I look at this passage on housewives, one of the shortest passages in the entire set with easy to moderate questions and an easy to read topic. The only potential disadvantage is that it has only 3 questions here. So this is the kind of passage which can actually be done very quickly. And because it's the first passage, this is considered a good warm-up for the entire section, whereby you can quickly start this passage, answer say 2 questions out of 3 and skip the toughest of the 3 questions and move on to the next easy passage, which is flight rules. So in that sense, again, this is a passage that I would definitely try. The third easy passage that I can see here, and here between these two, now observe this is more of a dicey case because both these passages have one factor in common, which is 6 questions each. So that doesn't differentiate. The passage on Pakistan TV regulations here, I can see that it is tilted towards this because this is a much shorter passage on rejection. Secondly, the questions also are tougher in the Pakistan TV passage. But in terms of pure readability, this is definitely better compared to power of rejection. So this is more the kind of scenario where you should try both these passages, but you need to be selective about the questions that you would attempt from these passages. So here, essentially what I would do is attempt all the 3 6-question RCs and 1 3-question RC. Within this, what I would try and do is in the first 2 passages, I would try and attempt as many questions as possible. So that would be around 8 to 9 questions. And here in the next 6-question passages, I would try and attempt questions selectively. So if I look at this entire group of 21 questions, even if I'm able to attempt anywhere around say 80% of the questions, I would be able to attempt say 16 questions fairly easily. And that would be a reasonably good performance as far as these RCs are concerned. Having looked at the RCs, now let's have a look at the non-RC questions. So within the non-RCs, if I look at the questions, the topics are fairly standard. 4 jumbled sentences, 3 contextual odd man out questions, and 3 para summaries, which has been followed across all the mocks. The contextual odd man out questions, as you know, always are a variant of jumbled sentences where you have 4 or 5 statements, you need to arrange them in a sequence and then identify the particular statement that does not fit into the group. So these are slightly trickier, but here they were purely easy. On the other hand, the jumbled sentences and para summaries were moderate to tough, so you had to be careful there. Now, because the para summaries are MCQs, we advocate being extremely careful because the wrong answer will deduct marks. On the other hand, because the jumbled sentences and odd man out questions are not MCQs, they are numerical entry questions, you can afford to take more chances. While we advocate that you mark all the numerical entry questions as far as possible, the number of good attempts in such a case is always considered as those questions where you are fairly sure of your accuracy. So here, even if you were to selectively attempt 3 to 4 questions in the non-RCs, where you would be sure of your accuracy, it would be a good performance. So on the whole, if I look at this, anywhere around 19 to 20 questions would be a very good performance as far as this verbal section is concerned. Let's have a look at the third graph here, which we will show for each section. This essentially indicates the difficulty level of each question from question 1 to 34. The blue bars indicate the MCQs while the pink orange bars indicate the numerical entry questions. So here, as you can see, we spoke about this passage on gender selection. Observe that of the 3 questions, there's not a single easy question. All these questions are on the tougher side. So when I look at this kind of a breakup and this kind of a topic, both these reasons are enough to tell me not to attempt it. On the other hand, when I look at this passage on flight woes, which is a fairly readable passage, all the questions here are extremely simple. There's just one moderate question, which again might be called moderate with respect to the passage itself. So definitely a passage which is worth attempting. By the same logic, if I look at this passage on housewives, moderate to easy questions, and again a very easy topic, that is why I recommended attempting it. Finally, when I look at these last 2 passages, Pakistan TV regulations and power of rejection, this is a combination of easy to moderate questions here and a combination of easy, moderate and easy questions here. So here the number of questions that you attempt is not necessarily 6 plus 6. You need to be smart enough and you need to attempt the right questions. If you are uncomfortable with 1 or 2 questions in the passage, you can definitely leave it. On the other hand, when I consider the numerical entry questions, definitely 2 easy questions up front and 1 right at the end. Among the others, these were on the tougher side, the jumbled sentences, so these could have been skipped. 1 para summary was again tough, could have been skipped. There was another tough para summary here, so this moderate one would have been important. So correct question selection among the numerical entry questions would have been extremely important. When I look at this entire breakup, I realize that with the right selection, attempting anywhere around 19 to 20 questions was definitely possible, and you would say even recommended. Let's have a look at one RC, let's say the one on flight woes. So this was the passage, which was a fairly short passage. Starting off from this point, some months ago I had the opportunity to take a short flight from Chennai to Bangalore. So it's more like a description in the first person where the person is talking about his experience. And then he says maybe just a little bit in case of emergency. So it's, when you read this passage, you will realize that this was more like a satire or a very caustic account of what the person went through in a flight. So it was a very sarcastic, caustic, acerbic passage. And then once you realize that tone, you can attempt all these questions pretty quickly. For instance, just look at the second question. It directly asks me for the tone of the passage. What is the tone? Now here you need to know the meaning of these words. Laudatory means lauding someone or complimenting someone, which is not the case. When you read it, you'll realize it's very sarcastic. Satirical is when you are making fun of something but in a very light, humorous way. So it could be appropriate, but I would have to look at the other options. Dogmatic is when I am taking one agenda or one theory and sticking to it no matter what. So it's more fanatical in nature. And again, because of that, I would eliminate it. Caustic is the one that best represents the entire passage because the author is talking in a very, very sarcastic tone. So here, this becomes the most appropriate answer as far as the passage is concerned. Now, when you read this, you would realize that most questions in this passage were really factual in nature, whereby a quick reading of the passage itself would allow you to answer at least 3-4 questions. A second round of reading would allow you to answer the remaining questions as well. Now, how do you attempt passages? Typically, we get asked this question and we tell students that one way to do it is to have a very quick cursory read of the passage initially. After you've done that, you need to have a look at the questions and then based on the questions, go back and read the passage in much greater detail so as to answer the questions in the entire context of the passage rather than just one paragraph. So that is something we follow. However, each student can have his or her own approach. On the whole, if we were to classify this section, we would say that it was a moderate section in a moderate to tough mock. It was easily possible to attempt anywhere around 4 RCs with the right question selection. Among the non-RCs, 3 to 4 good attempts also would have been good. So on the whole, anywhere close to 19 attempts would be a good performance as far as this section of iCAT01 was concerned. In parts 2 and 3 of the analysis, we will have a look at the DILR and font sections respectively. The analysis for all our previous mocks are available on our official YouTube channel, the link for which is given here. You can subscribe to our channel by clicking on this link. Also, to receive notifications every time a new video is put up, you just need to hit the bell button. Please feel free to put in your comments, feedback or questions on the thread below the video. Keep watching. Thank you and wish you all the very best.